dude. Flipping it all to someone who doesn't want to do restaurants at all, there's a woman out of LA, Zoe Comarin. She does a pop-up concept called Zoe Food Party in a backyard behind Highland Park's Collage Coffee. And she dresses like she's from the 90s and serves pita. And she just did a quick interview with Eater talking about why she doesn't want to have a restaurant, why she's okay doing pop-ups. And I think it's interesting that she talks about doing pop-ups and then getting burnt out with doing pop-ups. And then she says, we'd been doing pop-up dinner parties in New York and Berlin, but after a year I was exhausted. I wasn't feeling the fun. And then she came up with this idea of Zoe Food Party, where she says, quote, "I don't want to be locked under the details and minutia of the business. Kitchens are 5-alarm fires all day, every day. In my case, not to sound ego-driven, but what I really love about what I do is linked to my feeling as an artist. The pita parties are mini collections that take on a life of their own. The restaurant framework abuses people's lives. Their backs hurt, their hips hurt. That can be great, but if you are a food person and you love cooking/feeding people, we have to invent new spaces." And then Eater asks, "What do you envision for Zoe Food Party?" And she says, quote, "I'd love to lead workshops and gatherings where we maybe talk about food history. That's something I'm working on, as well as some collaborations. In a dream world, Zoe Food Party might be a space, but it's not a restaurant. I keep things improvisational, and I'm more comfortable growing a network where people tell me what they need. If there were a long-term plan, there might be the evolution of a space that might incorporate everything from a pop-up vibe to a CSA to a small production space. But it's not a restaurant. It could be anything, really." End quote. And this is a surprise and something I wanted to cover selfishly, right? Because it's where my head is, where I see things like Next doing really well, and then I see things like this where it's just about fun and about entertaining, and it's about feeding people food because you're excited about feeding people food, not because you want to pander to anyone's expectations or do things for the award's sake. That I hope everybody see my Ego is the Enemy video that's on YouTube, but it just provided a little bit of validation where, like, I'm not the only one that's thinking about food in this way and kind of like shifting the model. And again, so much of this show is for you, especially if you're early on in your career, to let you know that people are doing things in a different way. And I think that one thing that I wanted to caveat all this Michelin news from is I'm not defending fine dining because I think that it's the end-all be-all of high-end gastronomy. I mean, even though that's kind of like the definition of what I just said. I don't think that the Michelin fine dining restaurant as we know it today, and we see, different versions of around the world, is the pinnacle of cuisine and cooking. But what I do think is that when we talk on this show and my channel about ways to progress yourself as a chef and improve your career, there are certain avenues you can take and certain experiences you can draw from to get better and improve your skills and make yourself more adaptable or faster or a better team player or any of these things. And because we're just getting to see places that are consistently doing things that aren't restaurants in the traditional sense, they are the most concrete recommendation I can give at scale, with the platform that I have, to how you can progress. Because if I'm not going to recommend culinary school, and I don't necessarily think that these people that are doing career-long pop-ups is stable enough, I have to give you an alternative. And that's why I defend fine dining the way that I defend it, because I still think that to get your skills honed and to learn the rock-solid foundation that's going to prepare you to do something like what Zoe's doing, restaurants is still the best way to get those skills. And that's the route that I took, and that's what has led me to being able to be, what is effectively a culinary director in a business. And so this is all to kind of give you a sense that there is more out there and there is more to do, I would caution you from doing it from day one. Like, are you going to learn all the things you need to learn about food from going and working at Zoe's pop-up parties, Zoe's food parties? I don't know. You might learn a lot about thinking outside the box and being scrappy and, doing all these things. But then when it comes to doing your own thing, you're only going to know what you learn from her, right? If you spend 5 years there. I would argue if you spent 5 years at a fine dining Michelin restaurant, you're going to learn what it's like to work with people with tempers. You're going to learn what it is like to work with picky purveyors. You're going to learn guest expectations, and you're probably not going to be getting paid that much, so you're going to be doing it for other reasons other than financial gain. There's just so much to unpack there. It can be its whole separate podcast episode. But I wanted to kind of like clarify those things where you think you don't see me talking good things about pop-up restaurants. I'm always so conscious of how advice gets interpreted, right? And so I might be giving the advice of, well, it's really cool to do pop-up concepts like this, or look for spaces where you're not doing a traditional restaurant. And if you're at my stage where you're like sous chef level, right? Or if you are just coming off of being the executive chef or an owner at a restaurant and you're like, well, that didn't go very well. This can give you another outlet, and you can see like, oh, well, there are people who are doing it different, and they're actually happier and more successful with it. But then I get fearful if, you're on week 3 of culinary school and I'm saying these things. I don't want you to turn down an opportunity to go work in an established place that has some structure because you think that it's cool now to just do pop-ups. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm going on it, and I really want to get better at giving that clarity because context is so important. Context is key. An interesting piece from Phil Vitale from the Chicago Tribune.